internet.
cell reception. I don't get it.
And still in Texarkana, but transported back to the 1990s, the one, the only, the Teflon talker, Mason Shepherd.
Yo, what up, home fry? Yeah.
All right, DJ Jazzy Jeff, everybody, let's.
Woo!
Oh man, it's good to be back. It's good to be talking sports, and let's just go ahead and dive right in because I want to get this one knocked out of the way because I'm tired of talking about it. Finally, have a final resolution for the Deshaun Watson case.
Yeah, even though a lot of people still aren't happy about it, but I mean, at this point, like you, I'm fed up with it. I don't want to talk about it anymore in that sense of, well, we need to do something new with it. No, it's just move on, please, for all of us.
Just a quick recap. So everybody knows by now the Watson story, but this specific thing had to go to an outside arbitrator as agreed on by the NFL Players Association and the NFL. That arbitrators put down 6 games as the suspension. The NFL, who was angling for a year, then had the opportunity to appeal. And as I stated a couple weeks ago, Goodell got to choose who was the appeal person or who was the arbitrator for the appeal. So he went with somebody that was probably going to side with the NFL and get that extra year for the suspension. The NFL Players Association had said they're going to sue if the NFL went to appeal. So before this even got to the arbitrator, the NFL and the NFL Players Association sat down and agreed to an 11-game suspension, $5 million fine, and mandatory evaluation by behavioral experts and a suggested treatment program for Watson. So he played the first game of the NFL preseason and will not play for any more until he is eligible for reinstatement November 28th, assuming that he follows all of this treatment program and behavioral stuff, and that's when he'd be eligible for reinstatement. And I don't think it's an accident that the first game that he would be back and eligible for would be against his old team, the Houston Texans. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but I think that part of what narrowed it down to 11 games was so that Deshaun Watson would be available against the Houston Texans. So
you know what, to be honest, considering what you and I know because of the media classes we've taken, that's what happened. The NFL would never come out and say that, but let me put it to you like this, right? The object for a football game is to, besides the fact that we're not looking at the team's perspective, we're looking at the television network perspective, that is to draw viewers, which in terms draws money. That will be one of the most talked about games, one of the most watched games. That will be one of the most, really entertaining games to see Watson against Houston. So of course, because the NFL, if that game wasn't being played, Watson would have been out a year. But because that game is being played, I think that's why they were like, yeah, 11 games is enough.
I think I don't know if it would have been the year. It would have been the difference between like 11 games and maybe 12 or 13 games, I think, if it wasn't on the schedule. Because it was about halfway between 6 and 17. But I think that the NFL could have gotten 12, but the fact that they had that game coming up and 11 would perfectly sit on that game, I was like, okay.
Trying to rake into some of the dollars right there. But I think at the end of the day, some people still aren't happy about that on both sides. Again, some people think, oh, you're reneging and, oh, this still isn't good enough at the end of the day. And I think this is what me and my family have talked about personally. The lack of responsibility that the NFL has taken with other people who have had these charges, and more so they've been owners, Dan Snyder, the stuff that would happen with that Miami coach, not necessarily sexual assault or misconduct, but other major fouls in the league in their code of conduct policy. The Miami owner asked, which is recorded, so he did, telling Brian Flores to throw games, or Daniel Snyder and what's going on with him in Washington and the horrible stuff they did to the women in that organization. And Robert Kraft doing the same thing Deshaun Watson did and no penalties. And it's, of course, because, Goodell, his salary is paid by the owners and he gets to stay in power because of the owners and other associations. But it's just one of those things where it's like they're obviously trying to make an example out of players with Deshaun Watson in this case. And the way that I view it personally is whatever. And it's like we even said this on Sports. We didn't say this on Sports Zone. We said this on the main event. Whatever you want to think about Deshaun Watson as a person because of this, that's up to you for you to form your own assessment. My thing is, let's be fair throughout the process, which we know the NFL is not going to be. They never really have been. But, so at the end of the day, his punishment is there. He's got more than one punishment. Let's move on from this. We're not telling this to the victims, and for everybody else, let's move on. Because this has been, 2 years since I was a freshman.
Yeah, that it's been a long
2 years that this happened. So let's just move on at this point.
And I think, the NFL Players Association got what it wanted out of this, right? That out of the CBA, their whole thing was, we don't want Goodell to just be able to arbitrarily say that he was out for a year. Because otherwise, like before this CBA, Goodell would have been like, yep, you're done for a year or however long I want to.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's fair or whether or not you agree, that was the deal. So now that you have to go through this outside arbitrator on some of this stuff, the NFL Players Association gets what they want, which is Goodell can't just say that's your punishment and that's your punishment. They have to present their evidence. They have to actually present their evidence to somebody else. Not like the NFL investigators can't just go to Goodell and Goodell's like, yes, we have investigated us and found that we have done nothing wrong. Or, we've investigated you and we know we say you did something wrong, but we don't have to prove it. So either way, NFL players, this is now an agreement between the NFL and the Players Association. So this is the final settlement. And now we just have to see 11 weeks from now whether Deshaun Watson followed through on the evaluation and the suggested treatment program and all that stuff and see if he's ready to go. But of course, the Browns expected something like this. That's why they backloaded his contract. He's making almost nothing this year. And I say almost nothing, and that's only relative to the rest of his contract.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, hopefully Deshaun has learned something from this and players have from this, and we can not have to talk about this in the future.
Yes. I'm really hope that we're done talking about this as a talking point and moving on.
Yeah.
All right. So preseason football. I hate it. I despise it, but it's the Cowboys. So we do have to talk about it. They lost to the Broncos.
Yeah, unfortunately. I'm still repping the shirt, but
okay. So I know the big deal to talk about was penalties because the Cowboys were back to their old ways and they had, 17 penalties for 129 yards.
Oh boy.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
But this is preseason football. Do you know how many starters actually played? Pretty much none.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd say it's exactly none. I don't have the exact stats, but I'm pretty sure
I don't think any starters played.
Yeah. So
except maybe a little bit on the defensive side.
And that's across the line too. So you're going to get a lot of penalties on the offensive line when it's not the starters going because they don't get those game time reps. But remember, these are also players playing that might not even make the team. And the reason they're not going to make the team is because they do stuff like this.
Yeah, I think the reason why it's still important just from this perspective is, yes, it's preseason. Yes, a lot of these guys are going to get cut or waived or sent to the practice squad and never see daylights on the field except for right now. So I get that. I just think it's still important just because some of these guys are going to be on the team. And with Dallas, here's the thing. Now, if we're talking about, and I think it's also big because of where a lot of the penalties occurred in the team. Because if we're talking about a wide receiver who did a false start, that guy probably won't be here. So, yeah, if it was just mostly like the wide receiver, the running back, or the guys who are in positions where we know they've got enough guys and these guys are either just trying to be like the sixth man on the bench or make the practice squad, no, we shouldn't be talking about this at all. But when it's your offensive line that's very weak, with the starters on. And we know that a good portion of these guys that are playing right now are going to have to be filtered in when the regular season starts. That's a big deal because these guys will see field time, because Dallas not only has a bad history of offensive linemen getting injured and needing to be replaced, next man up, but we don't have no team really does, quite frankly, but we really don't have an in-depth offensive line depth chart on our roster. We just don't. We can't be like, okay, this guy's out, let's just insert this guy and he'll be just as good, or a little bit worse, but he'll still be serviceable. We have to deal with what we have, which is virtually kind of really nothing. So the offensive line was where these penalties were happening, and some of those guys we're keeping. So because Tyler Smith? We're keeping him, obviously, and he had penalties on himself, a few of them. So that's why this matters, because of not only because of where it is, but because the positions where it's occurring, we're keeping a good portion of those guys. Now, like you said, and like I just said, the receiver who had a false start or a holding call and a defensive back, those guys aren't going to be there predominantly. Those are usually the positions that get cut the most. But offensive linemen, that's the problem.
So let's take a look at some of the penalties then, and we'll just kind of break it down then. So we had a offensive holding on Jay Sprinkle, who is a backup lineman. We had a
Jeremy Sprinkle. That's a tight end.
Oh, that's a tight end. I'm sorry. Yeah, but still a blocking.
Arkansas,
a blocking penalty. Offensive holding on Tyler Smith.
Yeah.
We have, let's see, another holding on Tyler Smith.
Yep.
We have, I would say the only so we got a false start on Tolbert.
Yeah.
Or Tolbert. I'm not sure which one of those. I'm not sure if it's the
Tolbert.
Fancy Tolbert or another holding on Anthony Collins. Another offensive holding on Ball. Another offensive holding on Ball again.
Yep.
So, look, I'm not saying it's not important, but I'm saying that this is also not unexpected to be kind of like this. So if it wasn't the Cowboys, I would be more concerned, right? But this is the Cowboys, and maybe it's just that I'm jaded now because of the Cowboys, especially after last season.
Probably what it is.
But I'm looking at it going like, okay, we've changed nothing. If anything, we've gotten worse compared to last year's team, and we kept Mike McCarthy. So, I mean, this is nothing new, right? It's not like they were all of a sudden go like they never had 17 penalties. No, this was the most penalized team in the NFL last year. So I'm looking at it going like, okay, well, if it's more of the same, then fine. But like, it's the first game of the preseason.
Yeah.
And it's none of the starters in except for Tyler Smith, really, and maybe a couple other people here and there. But
yeah,
I'm just looking at it going like, okay, are penalties a problem? Sure. Penalties in the preseason? I'm not going to tear my hair out over it until we get to week 2 or 3. And then when it's happening, I'll be like, okay, here we go. We're the same team. Well, we've changed nothing.
And that's unfair for the Cowboys to do that, because I'm the one who's going to have to deal with you at that point. So he's going to be like, Mason, I'm sick of it.
Well, no, because
nothing.
Here's the thing, and I'll be honest, I actually just did not even watch this preseason game. This may be the first time in my memory that I did not watch the first preseason game, just because it's football. I did not watch it at all, and I think it's partially like I said, I'm just jaded and done with the Cow. Like I'm obviously I'm a fan, but I'm like I'm not gonna sit there and go, we could thrash the Buccaneers by 30 points week 1, and I'm just going to be like, this means nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
We could go 6-0 the first 6 weeks. I'm going to sit there and be like, this means nothing. Nothing until you prove that you are capable of actually making it past the first round of the playoffs. And actually, you know what? Not even the first round. We're way past when we should be. If you're not making it to the NFC Championship game, your season means nothing at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with that just because I think a lot of Cowboys fans are like you, and they sound like that parent who's talking to a child about their grades. You're not going to be able to do this until you bring your grade up. I think for Dallas, we have to also remember part of the reason why this catches fire is just because people like to knock Dallas, and we're easy to knock. Let's not pretend we don't give people ammunition to do that. I think that in the grand scheme of things, on a technicality, record-wise, Dallas had a good season last year, record-wise, and statistics-wise. Now, obviously, performance-wise, we can all be like, well, we may have won this game, but we didn't play well in it, or look how far we got in the playoffs, stuff like that, or didn't, I should say. I think for Dallas, and this is just the main thing, because I'm in the same boat with you in the sense of the wins are going to feel good-ish, but I want to see how far we are supposed to go. I want to see how far we can go. I'm not going to be happy about, we beat Green Bay. Okay, can we beat Green Bay in the playoffs? Because we haven't been able to do that for years. So I want stuff like that. I want to see as Dallas really grown. And I think the reason stuff like this catches fire is because it has shown, well, no, we really have the defense. Honestly, even with the back, defense looked really good. Again, and I had to tell my parents this. The same thing you're telling me, I told my parents because they were like, "Man, this defense looks great."
No, see, that is what gets Cowboys fans every single year. You start going, "Oh man, we look good. We look like we have a chance." Like last year, 5-1. I mean, even I was like, "Okay, this looks like a team." And on paper, it looked like the team that was going to make it. It looked like the team that was going to break through. And then what did they do? They do typical Cowboys things down the stretch and for the rest of the season, not even down the stretch. So I'm just like, man, we could go 10-0 through the first 10 weeks. And I'm going to be like, this means nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
And part of it is because, like, look, I was born in 92, so I'm quite a bit older than you. But even still, like the last Cowboys, I don't remember the Cowboys winning a Super Bowl. You know what the other Dallas teams have done since then? The Stars have been to the Cup 3 times, won once. The Mavericks have been to the finals twice, won once. The Rangers, despite the heartbreak, they at least went to the World Series in back-to-back years.
Yep.
What have the Cowboys done since then? They've won what? 3 playoff games? 4 total?
Yeah.
Total?
Yeah. I mean, hey, you think it's bad because you were born in 92 and can't remember. I was born in 01. I had to deal with Romo. So you tell me who had it worse, pal. Just telling you.
You didn't have to deal with Quincy Carter. That was bad.
You're right.
That was bad.
I had to deal with Patrick Creighton. So again, I'm just saying here, man. Look, I think, and trust me, I feel the sentiment, right? Because obviously, when the Mavericks won, I was in elementary and I went crazy because it was a big deal. My team won. We were champions. I think for me, the biggest thing for me with the Dallas Cowboys, and you see it, I don't know if you're watching Hard Knocks with the Detroit Lions, but you see it with Dallas too in the same respects of our culture sucks. I'm not talking about our fan base because we're not the Philadelphia Eagles. Shots fired. Our culture sucks on the field. There are so many people in the Cowboys organization that I just feel are happy to be a Cowboy. They're happy to be there. They don't want to put in real work. They are more concerned with, okay, I'm a professional athlete. I get the Instagram followers. I get the paycheck. I'm good. There are so many people in the Cowboys organization from Jerry Jones on down that are just happy to have a job. They don't care about winning. They care about making money from having the stadium and getting a WrestleMania in there, getting soccer games in there, building stuff. They don't care about, we need to focus on, I don't know, maybe punishing our offensive linemen when they do stupid stuff that they know they're not supposed to do instead of doing mojo drills, which was the dumbest thing I've seen on Hard Knocks in a long time. It's just one of those things where it's like, our culture is bad, and it contributes to what we see on the field. And I think that for Dallas to get back to where we were, and especially so people will stop laughing at us, for us to get back where we were, it's going to take, because it's like the Cleveland Browns. We have all the talent we're going to get. We can draft as much as we want. We can free agent. Well, we really don't even do that, but we can free agent as much as we want. We can do that all day. The reality of it is, to get us back to where we were, we got to change our culture, because the Cowboys back then, Emmett, Urban, and Aikman, those guys, they just had that championship mentality. Man, we're coming into practice. You can say what you want about their off-field activities. That mostly goes for Michael Irvin. But when he showed up to be the best 88 to ever play the game. Troy Aikman, Hall of Famer, he showed up to be the best. Emmitt Smith was the best and showed up to prove it. Those guys showed up with a chip. Dallas, now it's like they show up to, I don't know, make enough money so they can win chips at like a casino or something. I don't know. It's just, there is not that commitment to winning anymore. And I think that that's where our big problem is.
Yeah,
from Jerry on down.
Until there's a cultural reset where we stop looking at the Cowboys as a dynasty, and the players stop looking at the Cowboy, or stop using the success of the 70s and 90s Cowboys to bolster their ego, I guess, because there's still that perception, right? And it's even amongst the fans, not even just the players, there's still that perception of like, oh, well, we're the Cowboys, we've still won 5 Super Bowls. But I'm like, but you've done nothing in 20 years. Like, we have done nothing in 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So it's time to realize that we need a reset. We are no longer the Dallas Cowboys of old, because the Dallas Cowboys of old would have won something by now.
Oh yeah.
If you take the energy and emotion and drive of the 90s teams, and you put it, if you were able to transport that, maybe we would have won something by now, especially last year, the talent. Because I refuse to believe that there are players that was on those 90s Cowboys teams that would let anything that happened last year slide.
Yeah.
And yeah, can you imagine Jimmy Johnson running mojo drills and letting, players get away with holding penalties and being the most penalized team? There's no chance. There's just no chance. And until the Cowboys players, fans, organization, top to bottom, realize that we are no longer a top tier team in terms, we still make a bunch of money, but we are no longer a top tier team in the NFL. Because of the culture, but we keep acting like it. That's the problem. We keep acting like we are, even though we haven't been. And I would say at least 15 years, you could argue that every strong team has their struggles, but we have not been a top team in a long time.
Yawning because I was just thinking about the old days, man. It's crazy. But no,
better times.
Exactly. And I think, the Cowboys, we are, being dubbed America's team and winning 5 Super Bowls and still being one of the most watched teams in the NFL and having a reach like Dallas does, in the sense of, you can find, it's not just Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas. You find shirts like these worn by like people like me. It's people from California. It's people in Utah, Wyoming. You can find anybody from people in Hawaii are Cowboys fans. So, I think that type of reach, like you said, does go to people's heads, and they perceive themselves to be better than they are. And unfortunately, we're not even anywhere close to where we think we are or where we should be.
Yeah. Speaking of not being anywhere near what they think they are, let's wrap this up real quick with the news that the Big Ten completed a 7-year, $7 billion media rights agreement with Fox, CBS, and NBC. So this blows the SEC deal out of the water, where they agreed with ESPN for $3 billion, I think it was, for exclusive rights. But okay, the SEC, and maybe this is just a regional thing, right? But I feel like the SEC maybe has a little bit further reach than the Big Ten does. And maybe that's just because it's spread out a little bit more. Because like the Big Ten's kind of like Midwest Central kind of deal. Well, now you have USC at it, but for more it was there. Whereas the SEC, especially once A&M got in, it's Texas all the way down this way up and into like this whole southeastern part of the United
Basically,
States.
if you're a Southern team, you could end up in the SEC, and a lot of them are.
But so obviously this is going to be big in the Midwest because now these smaller teams that are in the Big Ten are going to be, getting primetime games. But like, is it really worth that much money to see Purdue versus Iowa? Or Purdue versus Indiana? Or I mean, obviously Michigan and Michigan State, big teams, sure. Penn State, you could argue, still going to be a big Ohio State. But outside of that, is it worth the $7 billion to show Purdue versus Indiana or Purdue versus Iowa?
Well, I that begs the question: are these small teams really small anymore? If we're getting national exposure, because we have to also check why we used to call them small. Besides the fact that they don't have the best players, it's because these were not teams you were seeing on TV, and if you were, they were in throwaway games that was on while the big game was on. Now that they're going to get this national exposure and more people from areas that are like, man, I'm from Michigan and I can't really get into this Michigan State, but I can go over here to Wisconsin. If you're doing that, are you really a small school anymore? I don't think you are, because now you're getting, again, you are by what your school has and championships and talent, but by exposure, you're not small anymore. And I think that that's big. And I think, you can say what you want about the Big Ten, and I told this to my dad, it's a trickle-down effect, because the Pac-12, which now nobody will really watch except for maybe like Utah or whatever, the Pac-12 used to be where the ACC is, where you would have a couple of those teams that would rise up, like Florida State, Clemson, or in the Pac-12's case, UCLA, USC, that would rise up, in Oregon, that would rise up and you'd have interest. Now the Pac-12 is falling off, and now, in my opinion, the Pac-12 is like the All-American Conference. Nobody's really going to care, because it's like what you said about the Big Ten. No one's going to watch Washington State play Oregon, which probably will be the only team that matters. The Stanford is and UCLA hasn't done anything in years. So that's become the All-American Conference, and the ACC is becoming the new Pac-12, where it's, okay, we have maybe a few teams that people care about, but not really, but we still got to give this conference TV time. And the Big 12 is becoming the new ACC, where it's like, these are teams with history that we respect, but they're not really doing anything now. It's kind of like how Miami was in 2009. So it's like, these are teams that matter. They just haven't really done anything as of late. And then the Big 10 is becoming the Big 12, where it's, okay, this is mainstream. People care. People want to watch. Let's focus in on what this is going to do. And the SEC has always been in a league of its own. That's that trickle-down effect now of how these conferences are going to work. And there's pros and cons. The pro is a lot of schools are going to leave, but they give schools like us. I told my dad, I made the joke, we could end up in the Big 12 potentially, maybe. We could potentially maybe end up in the Big 12 and get television exposure. At the same time, we could not. And with the cons, it's also, we're moving into where it may just be two conferences. Because I remember you bringing that up. It may just be two major conferences. And how's that going to play out? We'll just have to wait and see. I mean, it's not going to happen immediately right now. But at the same time, this is very interesting for college football, and just how the conferences are shifting their positions to becoming the conference from a few years ago.
Yeah, I think the main issue is that this now lends itself more to those super conferences, like I said, because these networks aren't going to shell out $7 billion to the Pac-12 or the ACC, like you said.
No, not a chance.
So now these teams, if they want to make more money, have to move into the SEC or the Big Ten. And so what happens is you keep taking the biggest name teams from the smaller conferences into yours, because you've got the most money. And with the NIL deals and the transfer portal being basically free agency, the best players are going to go to the Big Ten and the SEC.
Oh yeah,
maybe the Big
without a
12,
doubt.
but like the advantages that the Big 10 and the SEC are going to be able to offer are just even now that much bigger than the rest of the conferences. And so you're just going to keep seeing this disparity. Not to mention, we don't even know what's going to happen with college football, because you saw the article where the CFP is trying to take college football away from the NCAA.
Yeah.
I don't even know how that's going to work, but I don't know if the landscape of college football is going to stay the same, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. That'll do it for the summer Sidecard. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We got like one more week left before we're headed back to school, so we'll probably do one next week. Take a break to get settled in.
We won't be able to because I'm moving in. Moving in next Friday. Yeah.
He'll be back on campus, the Teflon talker, the Colossus of the Green Studio.
Colossus of Charisma. The
Colossus of Charisma. The Giant of the Green Studio. The one, the only Mason Shepherd will be back in Denton, Texas. So we'll get settled back in, and I guess at that point we'll be back to regular main events. Plenty of stuff to talk about there. All right, until next time.